Astonishing Legends would like to thank Western Digital, Squarespace, SimpliSafe, Quip, BetterHelp, our contributors at patreon.com, and you, our listeners, for making tonight's show possible.
Several episodes in a row now have been about UFOs, strange encounters, aliens, and other topics that evoke imagery of faraway places and possibly even different dimensions and their visiting inhabitants. But now, it's time to come crashing back to Earth, as well as our more easily accessible version of reality. The man at the center of tonight's astonishing legend did just that, careening towards Earth at 120 miles an hour on a cold and rainy night in 1971. You see, he jumped out of the back of a commercial airliner with $200,000 in ransom money. Whether or not his parachute opened properly and allowed him to land, well, alive, is still being debated. That's right, this is part one of a two-part series about the only unsolved case of air piracy in the history of commercial aviation, the story of D.B. Cooper. As far as the FBI is concerned, although the official investigation is over, the case is still open. They're even enlisting the public's help with it now. The original FBI investigators are of the opinion that Cooper was nothing more than a common and desperate thief. But others disagree. They see him as a Robin Hood, a financial vigilante, or most significantly, the guy who got away with it. Like all astonishing legends, there is so much more to this story than you might think. Even if you think you know the story of D.B. Cooper, have you heard about the multiple trails of evidence and all of the conjecture about who he might have been? There are no usual suspects here, but there are suspects. A few prominent ones, in fact. And we'll get to them in part two. But first, let's meet Dan Cooper, or the man who called himself that, when he bought a plane ticket on Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 just before Thanksgiving of 1971.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
Miss, I've a bomb here, and would like you to sit by me. A note passed by Dan Cooper to a flight attendant somewhere over Washington State on November 24th, 1971.
Join us tonight for part one of our two-part series on the infamous skyjacker, D.B. Cooper.
And we're back! Where's the ripcord?
Oh dear. Hopefully he will be okay. Well, we are back, folks, and thanks for joining us again. We wanted to remind everyone how grateful we are to have you as listeners, because without you, no us.
Indeed. Oh, see, I am back.
You're right. Welcome back.
Well, thanks for listening, and more importantly, thank you for supporting our sponsors. That and Patreon are the grease that keeps everything going around here, so thank you for that.
A quick reminder, the Kecksburg charity t-shirt benefiting the Kecksburg Volunteer Fire Department in the absence of their annual UFO festival this year is selling like hotcakes. It will be on sale until October 1st, so order while you can. Even if we consider a second run at some point, it won't be for quite some time. You can find that shirt by clicking the store button at astonishinglegends.com in the upper right corner of our webpage.
I've got mine already. Actually, I ordered. I'm still waiting, but they're arriving pretty fast.
Yeah,
saying.
I'm expecting several this week. I ordered a bunch myself.
Oh, very nice. All right. Well, we also wanted to throw in a mention to some of our good friends, Jackie and Mark He-ba-bee-bee-bee-bee.
Yes.
What? That? Okay, you're messing with me. Scott here has phonetically spelled out Mark. I've been saying Hubie. That can't be how you say that.
No.
Name,
Look,
right?
I honestly never really thought about this until I wrote it out for us to say today. But I looked at it on Facebook, and they did that, this is how you pronounce my name thing. And they both have it that way on their individual profile pages. It's He-ba-bee-bee-bee. No, wait. He-ba-bee-bee-e. No, wait. He-ba-bee-bee-e.
Will you stop?
Sorry.
Just please. Look, as somebody who has had to put up with a link to an Academy Award-winning film for Best Picture and the jokes that came with it for a long time now, many years, and a movie that people cannot seem to forget, don't be messing with us here. You're actually saying that those are the letters that they will have us pronounce.
That's
here.
what they put on their Facebook page. He-ba-bee-bee-e. Anyway, Mark and Jackie.
He-ba-bee-bee-e.
Yeah,
that's
Mark
it.
and Jackie.
He-ba-bee-bee-e. Well, at least there aren't any Heba Gump jokes that I know of. Well, Mark and Jackie own a few small businesses, and the reason we know them is because they drove out to see us when we had our joint meetup with Generation Y podcast in Atchison, Kansas a few years ago. And they brought us some wonderful pastries all the way from St. Charles, Missouri, outside of St. Louis. And folks, that's over a 4-hour drive. And I think Jackie may have said closer to 5 with traffic. Whatever it was, they are expert artisan bakers. The snack cakes were perfectly moist and super yummy, and I'm a big fan of shortbread cookies, and they had an assortment of those with really cool and creative paranormal caricature designs on them. It was really a memorable and generous treat.
Yeah, and at that point, their last name didn't come up. But the reason we're mentioning them, to be clear, is not because they asked us to, because we don't generally do that. We're mentioning them because we wanted to. One of their businesses was recently victimized by a complicated scam that delivered an enormous blow to them financially. We know about it because we saw the posts online.
Yeah, and all joking aside, it's really unfortunate, and the details, they're not really important, although Jackie posted most of them online. It's more important about recovering from the hit, especially when things were already dire thanks to COVID.
Yeah, so we're just saying that we've met and know these two personally, and they are one of us. Nobody deserves trouble, but these two really don't. They've set up a few ways to order gift cards and things online for both their businesses, SugarBot Sweet Shop and Little O's Soda Shop, and are working on shipping goods as well. But I tell you what, if we lived anywhere within 100 miles of them, we would just go by in person. You've been locked up forever with COVID anyway. Get out, do a road trip for a good cause.
Yes, indeed. It's delicious and worth the trip. And if you feel so inclined to help out fellow legenders, we're posting links to all that stuff, as well as a copy of Jackie's statement on the whole affair.
Yes, and get some delicious food to boot.
All right, well, check out our show notes for their story and ways to support them.
One last order of business. Forrest, make it happen.
Have you ever opened a door you couldn't close? Started something you couldn't finish? That's right, we're talking about Ouija boards here. If you have an astonishing Ouija board story, we'd like to hear it, and soon. So please write it out and email it to us at astonishingcontact@gmail.com with the word Ouija in the subject line so it stands out from the other emails about murder, mayhem, poltergeists, UFOs, and jackalopes.
Yeah, folks, we're looking for some good stuff here, primarily first or at least secondhand accounts. If you're sending it in, presume we may use it on the air, so let us know right in the email if that's okay. And if you'd rather stay anonymous, use your real name or pseudonym.
Wait, are you referring to Sock Monster 2319?
Yeah, we know who you are.
Oh,
yeah.
Is that a real person? Is that a real handle? No, I'll say this because it'll alleviate some back and forth emails here. Well, if you're sending it in, you, of course, would like it read on the air, possibly incorporated into a story, but also no guarantees on that. We have to sift through a bunch of them, I'm sure. But please do tell us how you would like your name said, if at all, and a phonetic spelling with that.
Yeah, especially if you're Mark and Jackie. And so send those emails to astonishingcontact@gmail.com and put Ouija in the subject line. Tess is standing by to drop them into the sorting hat.
Heba-BBE. I got it. I think I got it.
Okay, Heba-BBE.
Oh, also, people, you know how to spell Ouija, right? It's not Weejee.
No, it does sound like that. I think
know,
so.
that was actually a crime photographer of great renown back in the day.
Oh.
And you know why they called him Ouija, right?
Why?
Because he had this sixth sense. He would show up to crime scenes even before some of the police knew.
Oh, nice. It's like Night Stalker.
He was always on the scene. Yeah, he had a cigar and one of those big format 4x5 cameras, the speed graphics there. And anyway, yeah, look him up.
Well, anyway.
Sorry, I got off track here. Yes, I just like him and his photography here, but it's spelled Ouija, right?
Yeah, and if you spell it right, then our Gmail filter will pick it up and sort it into a folder for Tess to go through for us. It is a funky word.
It is a really funky word, and you're going to tell me how that word came about, because, of course, I've heard legends like the board itself said it wanted to be called that.
It's entirely possible, but we're not going to talk about it now. We're going to talk about it when we do the Ouija episode. Tonight, it's time to jump out of an airplane. So, where do we begin?
A middle-aged man appearing to be in his mid-40s, wearing a dark suit, crisp, ironed white dress shirt.
This is not Unsolved Legends.
What?
This is not Unsolved Legends. It's Astonishing Legends.
Are you limiting me to one stupid character voice per episode now?
Is that what's happening to me? Not me. Not me. That is a pretty good stack, though. I got to be honest.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, I took a little liberty there because it does start off like an unsolved mystery, which I'm sure I've seen. You know what? I actually didn't look to see what the original Unsolved Mystery episode this would have been.
This is on there. Yeah.
Of course.
I'm not a wiki, but I have seen it many times. Yeah.
Well, it's so perfect for that show. And when we start off with the description here, we're going to lay this all on you. But it's a series of events that got stuck in popular cultural history.
Boy, man, my phone has got a lot of apps.
I've noticed your phone looks a bit like a Mondrian modern art mosaic at times.
Look, I was just going through all these apps and the stuff that eats up my storage. And not only do I have a ton of apps related to my private life, like banking, home security system, my son's school, but a lot of it has to do with the show. You know, shipping apps, payroll apps, all the social media management apps.
Well, I guess you're an appetin' kind of guy.
You do know we're recording this, right?
Well, you didn't like that? No good? What are you saying here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah will just cut it.
All right, seriously, there's a lot of apps on my phone. Luckily, you and I don't have to worry about taking up all the storage on our devices because we use Sandisk's awesome data storage products.
Right you are, good sir. Well, Sandisk data storage solutions are a must-have for any sentient being. Their options make it oh so very easy to back up your irreplaceable photos and one-of-a-kind videos. You can transfer most important files to free up space for new ones in a snap.
If you're an Android user, check out the Sandisk Extreme Micro SD UHS 1 card. It is super easy to install, and they offer storage ranging from 32 gigabytes all the way up to a very impressive 1 terabyte of storage. This little guy is fast too, with up to 160 megabytes per second read speeds, and that will save you a lot of time, even if you're transferring high-res images or 4K UHD videos. Not to mention the dual drive Lux USB Type-C flash drive, all great products for Android users.
Yeah, I use the iXpand Flash Drive Go to dump a bunch of high-res photos and video onto it, and they freed up a ton of space on my phone, so now it's like having a new phone again. But I also have 2 RCA Atlas 10 tablet laptops which run Android. So for one of them, that runs the SLS cam, and then I also have a personal one. So with the Sandisk Extreme Micro SD UHS 1 card, I can quickly transfer some movies and music onto it, then simply slide the card into the micro SD slot, and now it's a perfect little entertainment center for travel. And with those super fast read speeds, playback of any media is smooth and seamless.
Take our advice. Free up space on your phone with Sandisk. Right now, our listeners get 10% off their first order of these featured Sandisk products.
But only when you go to sandisk.com/legends. That's SANDISK.com/legends.
Don't wait. Sandisk.com/legends.
Hello everyone, I'm Owen in Ireland and this is Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Think about the time period. This is 1971. It's a pretty good while ago. And for younger people who may not have heard of him, this is the only unsolved commercial hijacking in the world, I believe, and certainly in the United States, where the guy just got away with it. Whether he's dead or not, he got away with this. He succeeded in evading the authorities, we'll say, depending on how, if he did that by becoming a meat waffle or getting up and being able to enjoy the spoils of his theft. But let me not put the cart before the airplane.
No. Here, the luggage cart, of course.
The luggage
There's
cart.
There's going to be a lot of, yes, I'm sorry. There will be some airline puns in this, not too many. But we'll also talk about the history of hijacking, or skyjacking, sometimes as it was known back then. But the reason this one stands out is because of the nature of the culprit himself, in that he did not match what people think of as a raving lunatic with a knife or a gun that they've snuck on board and is screaming demands. He was just the opposite. So, as the story begins here, this is the description. A middle-aged man, appearing to be in his mid-40s, wearing a dark suit, crisp, ironed white dress shirt, black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie pin, and carrying a black attaché case, approaches the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter at Portland International Airport. It's the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve. He uses cash to purchase a one-way ticket to Seattle under the alias name Dan Cooper. The aircraft, a Boeing 727-100 designated Flight 305, is scheduled to depart for the approximately 30-minute flight north at 2:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Dan Cooper boards Flight 305 and heads for the rear of the passenger cabin to take his seat. 18C, or 18E, or some say 15D. Whatever the actual seat, it's near the aft stair door, where Cooper has some business to conduct later. While the plane is waiting to taxi for takeoff, he orders a drink, a bourbon and soda. Something to calm the nerves, I'm sure, but he seems quite calm and quiet throughout.
Flight 305 takes off on time at 2:50 p.m., and after they're in the air, just after 3 p.m., Cooper handed a note to Flight Attendant Florence Schaffner, who was seated near him in the 1/3 full cabin in the jump seat that's part of the aft stair door. The aft stairs being an unusual feature of this particular aircraft. Schaffner didn't look at the note and dropped it into her purse, thinking Cooper was just giving her his phone number. Dan Cooper then had to lean towards Schaffner and whisper, "Miss, you better have a look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner then, of course, read the note, which confirmed Cooper's whisper. After she read it, Cooper took it back from her and requested she sit beside him, to which she complied. Because he took it back, it's not known exactly how the note was worded, but Schaffner remembers that it was written neatly, in all caps, and with a felt-tip pen. Schaffner then calmly asked to see the bomb in his attaché case, and Cooper let her peek inside. She briefly saw 8 red sticks, or cylinders, 4 on top of 4, with a mess of red wires connecting them to what looked like a battery cylinder.
Cooper then told Florence Schaffner to write down his demands to take to the captain. This new note demanded $200,000 in $20 bills in, quote, negotiable American currency, and he also wanted 2 primary and 2 backup parachutes, totaling 4, and a fuel truck to be ready on the tarmac in Seattle for refilling as soon as they landed. Schaffner brought the note of demands to the captain. Some estimates figure that $200,000 would be around $1.2 million by today's standards. Is that what you have, Scott?
Yeah, I looked it up. As you know, I always do. I'm obsessed with that.
You always do.
Yeah, it's almost 1.3. It was 1.275 at current rates. Yeah, so that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
It's enough probably to do what he did.
Yeah.
Or at least to attempt it, I would think.
Yeah.
Right. $200,000 now, like that's half of a house.
Yeah.
in a big city. So maybe not worth what he did. Well, Captain William A. Scott contacted SeaTac ATC, or Seattle-Tacoma Airport Traffic Control, who then contacted local law enforcement and the FBI about the hijacking. So then Flight 305 circles the Puget Sound area for about 2 hours while the FBI and Seattle police round up Cooper's demands. The president of Northwest Orient Airlines at the time, Donald Nyrop, authorizes the ransom money and orders all employees to cooperate with Cooper's demands. During this time, the remaining 35 passengers were told that they were circling because of a, quote, minor mechanical difficulty, end quote here. The U.S. Air Force at McChord Air Force Base in Seattle offered to provide military-style parachutes, which I'm guessing used a static line to deploy. So what a static line is a cord where one end is attached to the aircraft and the other end of the cord is attached to the top of the parachutist's deployment bag, or, yes, D-bag. Get your jokes in here, Scott.
I'm not making it. I'm not touching that one.
Okay. Well, that's where the chute canopy is packed, which is then packed into a container strapped to the skydiver's back. And as the jumper falls, the static line pulls the chute out of the D-bag, and the rush of air inflates the canopy, which should fully open in about 4 seconds. And if it doesn't, students are trained on how to cut away the primary chute and deploy the backup chute. So it seems possible Cooper didn't want the Air Force chutes that may have opened automatically, and he demanded instead civilian parachutes with manually operated ripcords, which the Seattle Police Department got from a local skydiving school. So it seems to me possibly he had already planned how and when he wanted his chute to open, and he wanted to control it.
Yeah.
No, that was wild speculation on my part to generate some discussion here. But here's the thing. Pay attention to this because the chute matters.
Yes.
That is one of the main points of the investigation here, because it could determine if he lived or died, or if he knew what he was doing or not.
That's right, because he had 4 chutes to choose from, and the choice of chute that he made says a lot, potentially, about his experience. Of course, also, some people say that it doesn't, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
If it tells you anything about his level of experience of jumping out of aircraft.
Right.
Well, law enforcement authorities notified Cooper that they had met his demands at 5:24 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Flight 305, which had been circling, then lands at SeaTac Airport at 5:39 p.m. So you think about it, originally it took off around 2:45, 2:50. It's coming back now just under 3 hours later. The airport was dark by that time, with sundown at least an hour earlier, and Cooper told Captain Scott to park the jet in a lighted but isolated area of the flight line and close the window shades so any snipers couldn't get a shot. Al Lee, the Seattle operations manager for Northwest Orient, walked up to the 727 with the cash in a backpack and the 4 parachutes, dressed in civilian clothing, so that Cooper wouldn't mistake him for law enforcement. Al Lee then meets flight attendant Tina Mucklow at the aft stair, the ones we mentioned before, to hand her the cash and parachutes. Cooper then orders flight attendant Florence Schaffner, senior flight attendant Alice Hancock, and all the rest of the passengers off the plane. While the jet was refueling, Cooper notified the flight crew he intended to have them fly towards Mexico City on a southeasterly course, with the landing gear down, the cabin unpressurized, the wing flaps lowered 15 degrees, and the 727 flying at a maximum of 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters altitude, and at the lowest minimum airspeed possible without stalling the jet, which is going to be right around 200 knots of airspeed or 230 miles per hour, or 370 kilometers per hour for those of you not in the States.
Which is the ground speed, yes.
Yeah, the ground speed. And that's still pretty quick, especially for exiting an aircraft.
Yeah, it's going to be violent. But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you think Cooper knew the lowest airspeed a 727 could fly without stalling? Here's my question here. As we go along, there are some things, again, that make it seem like he either really studied this, he maybe was a pilot himself, or he knew nothing about it but knew the right questions or right things to ask, or was this all diversion? And for example here, did he know that that aircraft could make it all the way to Mexico City?
I think he knew something because that speed is too random a request. I looked up the limitations of this particular aircraft. It was a 727-100, not to get too far off the story itself here, but just briefly, with the flaps at 15 degrees, and I don't know if this is for the 100 variant, but this applies to the 727. With the flaps at 15 degrees, the minimum airspeed it can maintain is 205 knots or 235 miles per hour or 378 kilometers per hour. So he was pretty spot on with that request. Right. And I guess the reason you're bringing up about Mexico City is because Captain Scott wound up saying we don't have enough fuel to get to Mexico City, right?
For my notes here, Cooper was told by co-pilot William Radizak
right.
that the 727-100's maximum range under those conditions now would only be about 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers. So they would need to refuel again before entering Mexican airspace.
So that's interesting. So what that says is it's possible that he knew the range of the aircraft, but he didn't take into account the range of the aircraft with the flaps deployed and the extra resistance.
Possibly.
And so he might not have realized, hey, we're going to run out of gas. With this particular setup, we're not going to have enough gas to get to Mexico City.
Exactly. It's not optimal flying conditions for a passenger jet of that size. But what I love about this is that after some deliberations on the options, Cooper and the flight crew agreed that a second refueling could take place in Reno, Nevada.
Yeah.
So I love that they worked this out. It's like, again, he's not screaming at them. It's like, sir, Mr. Hijacker, that's not possible like you always see in these stories. And it's like, I want to fly halfway around the world. It's like nonstop. Well, we can't do that. So he's willing to negotiate and take their advice. Or maybe he knows that it doesn't matter.
Oh, and you know what's funny to me? One of the things I did in preparation for this episode was I watched this really great National Geographic special called The Skyjacker That Got Away.
Yeah.
You know, they do these little segments of reenactments. And this is always a thing for me when I'm seeing a reenactment, but it's a historical documentary style thing. It's like you want to know how much they're making up the dialogue and how much they aren't, you know, because in that scene about switching it to Reno, they go to him and say, you know, we can't get to Mexico City. And he just says, let's go to Reno. Reno's nice. Like, did he say that? I don't know if he said that, but whatever.
No.
Like, who knows what that conversation was really like? I mean, it was still going south, which is what he wanted. He wanted the craft to be going south. Yeah.
That's the main thing here. And I'll let you know a little insight. I have a friend who is a producer for some other podcasts that deal with true crime. And sometimes the dialogue is imagined.
Well,
There's
yes.
some artistic
but this is Nat Geo. So, but you know what? They're reenactments. They make it clear it's a reenactment.
Well, here's another thing that kind of points to my case here. Okay, so now Cooper wants the 727 to take off with the aft staircase lowered. Okay, that's what we're talking about in the back there.
Yeah.
For deplaning and getting on the plane, so you don't need a jetway and you don't need the drive upstairs. Got those. But however, headquarters at Northwest Orient opposed the idea, saying like taking off with the staircase lowered would be unsafe. But Cooper insisted that it would be safe. but he agreed to take off with the staircase exit closed, and then he was going to open it in flight. So
did he tell them that, though? That I'm going to open it later?
No, he apparently insisted that it was safe. So somehow he knew that, or he just, no, it's fine. You're going overboard with the safety. You can take off and land with them open. So from my reading, I'm not sure if he actually said, well, don't worry about it then. I'll just open them in flight. But he was certain that it would be safe, or at least possible, to take off and land with the aft staircase deployed. That request anyway is going to let them know, like, wait, what's this guy doing?
And I would just want to stop for a second and explain about these stairs, because not a lot of planes had these. I don't know which ones, even if any, still do. But for those of you that aren't familiar with them, these are not stairs that come out the side of the aircraft like a Learjet or a private jet or something. They are literally in the back of the fuselage, at the end of the tail, underneath the tail. They run along the center line of the fuselage and come right out the back, like the ramp on the back of a truck or something like that.
It's a clamshell design. It lowers down, and so that jump seat that Flight Attendant Schaffner was seated in, that's part of the mechanism there.
Yes.
Well, after a delay with refueling on the apron due to vapor lock with one of the fuel trucks there, the 727 took off around 7:40 p.m. And Cooper had been asked by an FAA representative to talk to him in person. I think maybe as a stalling tactic. They do that sometimes. But Cooper denied the request. He wanted to get on his way. But now there were only 5 souls aboard: Captain William Scott, co-pilot William Radizak, flight engineer Harold Anderson, flight attendant Tina Mucklow, and of course, Cooper. So upon Cooper's orders, once airborne, flight attendant Mucklow was to go into the cockpit, close the door, and stay there for the duration. But before she did, she noticed he was tying something around his waist. Now, there were other things that Tina Mucklow noticed about Cooper during her time aboard with him, because that was quite a while, especially for the 2 main flight attendants there that dealt with him. The other things that she noticed was that he was very polite. He was articulate, totally calm the entire time. She described him as, quote, rather nice. He was never cruel or nasty. He was thoughtful. So Cooper had paid for another bourbon and soda, and they tried to give Mucklow the change. So he had another drink during this whole time he was in the air with them. You might as well relax. The hard part is coming up, or one of the hard parts is coming up, but you're already invested in this. It's happening. And also, once on the ground in Seattle, Cooper had offered to give the flight crew dinner during the refueling as part of his demands. So he's kind of a thoughtful guy for a hijacker.
Yeah, and I think the impression seemed to be that there was a, not necessarily charming, but there was a charm to him, or that he seemed very calm. I mean, and my takeaway from this story, not to get ahead of myself here, is that he was cool as ice, this guy. He just did not seem rattled or nervous. He seemed very focused and like he had a plan. He was going to stick to that plan, and it was pretty well ironed out, and he was committed.
And I think that's why. He wasn't panicked because he didn't know what to do next.
Right.
He'd thought this all out. He had done some research. Now, it's going to be weird here when we hear some details, because you'll wonder how much research he actually did. But Mucklow also said that Cooper seemed to know the lay of the land from the air, because he had told her, it looks like Tacoma down there, when they were over it. And he also knew the drive time from McChord Air Force Base to SeaTac Airport. So he seemed to be from the area, possibly, or at least he knew it or studied it well.
Yeah, and if you can recognize a city from the sky at night, that suggests that you might be a pilot as well.
Possibly, yeah. There are some things that he was very familiar with, but also that spoke to his demeanor. He's a careful, planned guy. He's not a hothead. He's not angry. He doesn't have a beef. He just thinks he has a way to get away with his cash, and he's got most of it mapped out.
Around 8 p.m., a warning light for the rear stair hatch opening came on, and the cockpit crew offered to help with the airstairs via the intercom to Cooper, but he declined. The flight crew could feel the air pressure changing in the cockpit, which told them the door had been opened or the apparatus had been lowered. About 13 minutes later, the 727's tail quickly raised up enough that the pilots had to adjust the trim to get the jet to fly level again.
So what people think now is that the action of the aft stair lowering, and it lowers with gravity.
Right.
And hydraulics. It doesn't need to be motorized to lower, but that action there caused the tail end of the jet to kick up a little. So they had to adjust for it. So that tells you what's going on back there, because keep in mind, they are all in the cockpit with the door closed. They can't see what he's doing back there. And again, another part of the plan.
According to the National Geographic documentary, they were petrified that he was going to jump and then blow up the plane. That's what that was a concern they had, that they, that's it. He's going to get off the plane and then blow it up. And now if you think about it, you think about how airplanes work, it's just like sailing or whatever. They're not pushed up into the air. They're lifted by low pressure on the tops of the wings. And if you think about those stairs coming down, it probably would generate lift on the top of the stairs, a low pressure area on the top, which would cause the tail of the plane to want to come down when the stairs are deployed. Now I'm speculating here, but I would imagine that that's what you would have to adjust for if you were lowering them. The other thing that's interesting to me too is about him saying, "Oh no, you can take off with these down." It's like, how do you find that out? Like, who do you talk to about that? Because that's not something you're going to get to try somewhere.
Right.
You're probably going to have to ask a 727 pilot or be around them and say, "Yeah, you think you could take off with those stairs down? Is that feasible?" In a casual conversation. Where do you meet that guy? Oh, maybe you're a mechanic.
Yeah.
Maybe you work at an airline. But more on that later.
Well, yeah, I don't want to head towards it's like, I don't need to know how to land, just how to take off.
Yeah, just how to take off. Can you take off with these stairs down? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
If someone's late and they're running and trying to catch up, I don't know.
Right. Part of the range of questions that should raise a red flag. Well, at least perhaps it tells you when Cooper jumped, approximately 8:13 p.m.
Right.
Because now, of course, they're going to use all these clues to try and triangulate where he left and where he may have ended up. Well, around 10:15 p.m., the aircraft landed safely at Reno Airport with the aft airstairs still deployed. And as the jet was quickly surrounded by local Reno police, FBI agents, Nevada state troopers, and sheriff's deputies, it was not known yet if Cooper was still on board. But as they searched the plane, it became apparent that he was long gone. So soon after the plane took off from Seattle Tacoma Airport, it was followed by 5 aircraft. And 2 of them were Corvair F-106 Delta Dart fighter interceptor jets scrambled from McCord Air Force Base. Another was a Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star training jet from the Air National Guard, diverted to the chase until it ran low on fuel and turned back before crossing the Oregon-California border. And that jet never caught up close enough to the 727 to make visual contact. And get this, none of the pilots from the 5 planes saw Cooper parachute from the plane or had any estimation about where he could have landed. The 2 F-106 pilots didn't see any object visually or on radar. Whether a body wearing black clothes or a chute opening, any of that, the chances would have been slim anyway, with it being night with low visibility and cloud cover obscuring the ground. So you can't fault them. It would have been nearly impossible to see a speck leave the plane.
Yeah, in the dark and the clouds and the rain. And also, they can't match the plane's speed because it's going so slow. So they're having a circle all around it. Yeah, it's no surprise that they didn't see something. And it's not like he's got a bright light on him. For better or worse, the whole world is now going online. And whether you teach music lessons or have a pool cleaning company or you're a real estate agent or maybe a home improvement contractor, whatever your goods and services may be, in today's market, having a website that is not only attractive and up to date, but functional and searchable is more important than ever.
Astonishing Legends has relied on Squarespace for a long time now, and we think you'll be just as impressed with their services as we've been. Simply put, Squarespace is the all-in-one website building platform.
Squarespace gives you the creative control to design and launch a spectacular website that will stop them in their tracks. And don't worry, you don't need to know a thing about creating websites to do this. It's very user-friendly. Begin your online transformation by choosing from one of the engaging, customizable site templates created by world-class designers. They look great just as they are, but feel free to play around and express yourself to inject your unique brand.
It's true, and you'll realize that as soon as you take a look and play around with it. Not only do all the layouts look really slick and modern, but each layout design has something unique to offer for whatever your endeavor is, and you're sure to find one that works best for you. Then once you start adding what they call content blocks, you'll see you have so much functionality and capability to choose from. You can add all the usual stuff like photos and maps and calendars, video and audio, but Squarespace also has embeddable features like newsletters, appointment scheduling, a donation widget, Zola, OpenTable, Bands in Town, Foursquare Storm, SoundCloud, and so much more. And if you ever need any help with it, they got your back with 24/7 award-winning customer service.
Plus, it's all mobile ready for any device without any extra effort. Don't wait another minute to separate yourself from the competition. It's all within your reach. Time to take control of how your business is perceived online, to finally showcase your expertise and talents in the best light possible.
Check out squarespace.com/legends for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LEGENDS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Once again, that's squarespace.com/legends for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LEGENDS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Here's the thing about home security companies. Most trap you with high prices, tricky contracts, and lousy customer support.
So, while there are a lot of options out there, there's only one no-brainer: Simply Safe. Get this, you can get started for just $15 a month.
If you want to know why U.S. News & World Report named Simply Safe the best overall home security of 2020, there are 3 simple reasons. First, there are no contracts, no tricks. Second, Simply Safe can blanket your home with an arsenal of security cameras and sensors. And third, there's no pushy salesman posing as the installer. You install it all yourself. Easy peasy.
Yeah, we've all heard aggravating stories about homeowners needing to cancel a security contract, only to find out they will have to pay hundreds of dollars to cancel a service they don't even want anymore.
How about waiting all day for a supposedly scheduled appointment, only to be pushed into upsells and add-ons once they arrive?
Or worse, an out-of-the-box security system that doesn't have the gear you need to cover your home effectively. Different properties need different sensors. I actually bought a do-it-yourself out-of-the-box home security system like 15 years ago. It was basically just a motion detector with an alarm, which was fine for the time, but when you look at how far we've come with tech and services, Simply Safe has all the features of a professional security system that you can set up yourself in about an hour. No technician appointment necessary. It doesn't get more no-brainer than that.
These are the reasons why both Forrest and I love our Simply Safe security systems and recommend Simply Safe to you. With Simply Safe, whatever you need, whatever you require, whatever type of property you're trying to protect, Simply Safe will secure every window, door, and room without any of the drawbacks, from glass break detection to freeze and flood sensors. And no kidding around, you can install it yourself. It's as easy as peeling and sticking the sensors where you need them. It only took you, about an hour maybe for your apartment, Forrest?
Well, perhaps a little more than that, because I get very nitpicky about placement of stickered things. But yes, it was just about an hour. And really, that included setting up the keypad and getting the app up and running on my phone. And that controls everything.
The sticker complaint from a guy who still has the sticker on the front of his car stereo. What year is your car? The one you're supposed to peel off when you buy it?
2003.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Once I do, it's going to look brand new.
Head over to simplysafe.com/AL and get a free HD camera for our listeners. That's simplysafe.com/AL to make sure they know that our show sent you.
That's simplysafe.com/AL.
Hi everybody, this is PJ Hallowell, and I like to sculpt monsters and listen to Astonishing Legends with Forrest and Scott. Actually, let's get back to them right now.
Well, I mean, okay, so we're at the point of the narrative where he's left the plane. For all intents and purposes, the rest is a mystery.
Yeah.
After that point, after 8:13 p.m. of thereabouts, he's gone. And now nobody really knows what happened after that, but they're going to try and piece together all these clues. So I thought now would be a good time to go back and discuss some finer points of what we know so far. One thing is that, when you jump out of a plane, you often see people wearing goggles because that wind on your eyeballs is stinging at 200 miles an hour.
Possibly 230, really. With the flaps
crazy.
at 15 degrees, that's what they're saying. I mean, maybe it can go a little bit slower. I don't know how hard and fast these limitations of operation are that we found online, but
right.
They're saying at 15 degrees, you got to be doing at least 235.
Yeah, and here's one of the things I wonder about. He did have an attaché case, but it probably had a fake bomb in it. It's not like he had a backpack or a carry-on, a roll-on with some camping gear and some gear he needed. He was very lightly equipped. Here's the other thing is that once Flight Attendant Florence Schaffner delivered the first note of demands to Captain William Scott, Cooper had put on sunglasses, which is now what you see in one of the now famous police sketches everyone is familiar with. So she goes up to the captain. When she comes back, he's wearing dark sunglasses. They've looked at him enough, but he's going to add a little bit of disguise here. And hopefully he took those off before jumping out. But then again, some eyewear would have been handy.
Yeah, but considering what else he was wearing is just like regular clothes and loafers Why not wear sunglasses? I mean, you're completely unprepared for the elements for this jump. So go ahead, put sunglasses on. Why not put on a clown hat? You know,
why look where you're going? Because it's going to be a mass of wet, tall trees that you're probably going to get hung up in 70 feet off the ground.
Yeah, and this is way before GPS, folks. Like, you didn't know where you were, even in the airplane. You know, it's like, I mean, you did. Of course, they knew where they were, but there was a whole different type of navigation back then. So it's, and as for civilians, if you land in the woods, you're in the woods.
Yeah.
You got to be pretty smart cookie with a compass to figure out where you are when you land if you're jumping out of a plane in the middle of the night.
Well, we can only assume because so far he's had a plan that's worked. He's got everything he needed. He didn't get tackled or diverted. He knew what he was doing up to a point, but he jumps out wearing a suit. So who knows? The other thing about it is that he didn't initially or immediately tell anyone in his note where he wanted to go. So again, this is plotted out, and a lot of this, I believe, has been some kind of diversion tactics. It's, again, he's like, I want to go to Mexico City. Well, he knows he's not going there that far.
Right.
But they don't know that. So it's like, well, I plan to jump out around somewhere close to Mount Baker. And then they know they're going to be looking for him. But that was going to be a mystery. And so he had part of that set up. But then again, why does he demand 4 parachutes? Is that more diversion?
My thoughts on this were that he was worried he was going to get one that was sabotaged.
I thought about that, yeah.
That's one thought I had. Another one was to, like you said, maybe misdirection to keep them guessing, maybe to make them think he's going to make a flight attendant jump or a crew member jump with him.
If he was going to keep some passengers on board, maybe to make them think they had an accomplice, or he had an accomplice on board, and they would waste time with an investigation searching them. Yeah, it's just more diversion, I think.
And also, he could have been using parts of ones that he didn't use to secure the money to himself, you know, to strap things to him, because he left with the suitcase as well. He's going with a lot of stuff. And here's the thing about this money, folks. It was, I think, 20 pounds or 25 pounds of money. And he had asked for 20s. If he'd asked for hundreds, it would have been about 5 pounds. Now, I did see a gentleman interviewed in one of the shows I watched. I can't remember if it was a National Geographic one or not. I watched also, I think it was Brad Meltzer's show, Decoded possibly, about this. Yeah. They interviewed a military jumper, a guy who just jumped a ton, and because everybody's like 20, he had all this weight with this money, he's 20 pounds of money or what, and the guy was like, yeah, I've jumped with 180 pounds of stuff. He's like, that's really not that big a deal if you have any kind of experience at all, and even without experience. So that sort of short circuits that idea. Is people like, oh, we had this extra weight, he was out of control. It's like, it's really not that much. But remember, he took the notes back from the cockpit. No notes were found. The only thing he left behind was the tie and lots of fingerprints. We'll talk more about that later, but like 60 or 70 fingerprints. I think that's it, right? And I mean,
well, one of his
glasses, I do know that his drink got mixed in with other glasses, and they never figured out which one it was.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, of course, now it's time to start the investigation, because as soon as the FBI had learned of the hijacking in progress in flight, they immediately opened an extensive investigation, which would last for many, many years, that they called NORJAK, NORJAK, for Northwest Hijacking. So as agents searched the 727 for clues and evidence, they discovered Cooper's black JCPenney clip-on tie, which he'd removed. So at least he had the forethought of like, I'm not going to really need this. You know, it's like I dressed down a little bit.
It is interesting to me that he was so careful and took everything with him, including the notes that he circulated, but then he left that tie there intentionally. You know? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, nowadays, which he may not would want to do, is that they were able to get a DNA sample from that tie. Of course, decades later, yes.
Yeah, and there's some interesting stuff about that DNA. I always wondered what happened with that. I did find this one article by Jack Cloherty. This is on ABC News's website. I'm not sure where all it was originally published, but they were able to compare that DNA to one suspect. And believe me, the list of suspects is long, and we'll talk about that more in part 2. But this suspect was a gentleman named Lynn D. Cooper, and they compared that DNA to his daughter, and it was not a match. But one of the interesting things about the DNA, to get more specific about it, well, actually, here, let me just read you this quote. Over the years, the story of D.B. Cooper became the stuff of folk songs, books, and movies, but the cold case got warm again earlier this year when it was reignited by Marla Cooper. She provided the FBI with information about her uncle, whom the family called L.D. I remember when this story came out. Yeah. And a guitar strap that may have carried his DNA. Tests later found that the guitar strap did not have any DNA remnants. Cooper also put the Bureau in touch with L.D.'s widow and her daughter. The FBI took a DNA sample from the daughter to compare to the DNA on the clip-on tie, but it did not match up. FBI Special Agent Fred Gutt told ABC News it's possible that the DNA sample taken off the tie was not from the hijacker. There are questions about the tie. It may have been borrowed or purchased used. The DNA may be from someone else. He also said the tie had 2 small DNA samples and 1 large sample lifted off in 2000 to 2001. It's difficult to draw firm conclusions from these samples.
Yeah, it's something that he wouldn't have bothered with at the time, of course.
Right.
But fingerprints, yes, and he wasn't wearing gloves. So also still on the tie, as we said before, was that mother of pearl tie clip. So what that looks like, and here's what's kind of cool, is you can see the tie. There's pictures of the tie with the tie clip on the FBI website, and I'll see if I can't lift that and put it in our gallery here, if they don't mind. But you can see the actual clip-on tie here. Not real expensive, JCPenney, moderately priced, and leave behindable.
I think they'll let us use that picture. They're counting on us to figure out what the Nazi bell is. So,
well,
there's kind of unspoken camaraderie between the FBI and us.
Well, that's what this case is here. That they are officially done with it, but it's like, hey, all you amateur sleuths, have at it. Here's what we know. Good luck, and let us know if you trip onto anything. It's not like they're discouraging people from looking. That's the power of crowdsourcing nowadays. So, as we maybe start to talk about former agents and field agents and CIA people, that is one trick that I'd learned, that in the field, if they have to dress up, that they'll usually wear a clip-on tie, because if you get in a fight, your combatant doesn't use it to choke you with.
That's right. And as someone whose first job was selling children's shoes.
I thought you were going to say choking people.
No. My first job was selling children's shoes, which part of that job is being choked by children. Right. I, too, wore a clip-on tie so that when the little jerk balls went to grab it, it just came right off in their hands.
That is
one of the first hard life lessons I learned, yeah.
Yeah, well, dealing with the general public, that should be a life lesson for all of us on both sides of that equation there. Well, he left it so he didn't care, and even back then, it's like, well, good luck with the fingerprints. I don't know what he did about that, but as you stated earlier, yes, 66 unidentified latent fingerprints were lifted from the cabin. And also in the cabin were 2 of the 4 parachutes, as we said. So one of the remaining parachutes was opened, and 2 of the suspension cords have been cut from the chute canopy. And here's another curious thing. As many as you campers out there know, parachute cord comes in handy in a survival situation. You'll see now knife handles and bracelets made out of them in case you're in a jam. It comes in very handy. And is that what Tina Mucklow saw Cooper wrapping himself with when she glanced back and he was doing his thing there?
Yeah, it's
was he tying was he tying that attaché case to himself, tying the money to himself, because he knew you're not going to jump out with just holding the handles on the bags. You're going to want to secure that. So obviously the extra chute, at least one of them, was worthwhile, at least for the cords.
When you think about him jumping out with not only the money, but the bomb, which I'm presuming was a fake bomb at this point, where did that go? I mean, we'll talk about what they did find, but the only thing they found was related to the money. They have not found anything related to, there was a parachute, but there's some question around that. We'll talk about that in part 2.
Right.
And that was found relatively recently in the history of this case. But the rest of it is, if he didn't make it, you feel like somebody would have stumbled across the attaché case with the fake bomb in it.
Yeah, but it's very dense down there. And again, there's a lot of things that are very rational and calculated about this. Some clever things that Cooper did. And then there's the other half of it, I think, which is why I think this case is so compelling to people, is that there's a lot of things that kind of don't make sense. It's like you're going to drop out at night. And it gets cold there, as you were saying before. Like, it's cold. It's the winter. It's the night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You think he might have also maybe waited for like a good Thanksgiving meal? This guy, I certainly would have. And then maybe a couple of days later, after you digested and sat back and enjoyed yourself, maybe then go. But that's the day he picked. It gets dark very early. It's very wet and cold. And there's cloud cover. You're going to land in a bunch of trees, perhaps, or break your leg on a rock. A lot of this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But here's another good piece of evidence that was left behind. His description. Because the 2 flight attendants, Schaffner and Mucklow, had spent a fair amount of time with Cooper aboard the flight, up close. And they both gave nearly identical physical descriptions, which were used to generate a series of composite sketches. And I believe Schaffner and Mucklow were interviewed in separate cities to separate them, obviously, and they got nearly identical descriptions. So, yeah, they got a really good look at this guy without the sunglasses and with the sunglasses. And also, I shout out to flight attendants and all the cabin crew because, man, they were pretty cool themselves. And they're trained to be.
Yeah.
And it takes that kind of temperament because, one, like you said, you're dealing with the general public who is pulling your tie off and, geez, nowadays throwing all kinds of weirdo tantrums and just awful behavior, but a lot of composure with them, which is also what we saw in Flight 401 in that tragedy there. Yeah, so my hat's off to them, but they were able to get a good look at this guy and be able to describe him to a T, which is why I trust the composite sketches. Now, just personally, you'll see that a lot of the times where a witness will give a police sketch artist the description. Nowadays, of course, it's computerized, but when you have a good sketch artist and they're able to lay that out, and then you see the actual guy get caught, and you're like, it's close. It's a little, I see you're in the ballpark, but not exact. It's not that close, but they're kind of in range there. You see that. Here, I tend to trust these composite sketches much better because, again, he's acting rationally. He's not trying to hide his face other than the sunglasses. He's pleasant. So there should be face-to-face conversation here, contact and interaction. Not the case where like, don't look at me, you usually see in the movies.
Yeah.
Look down. So, yeah, they were able to get really good descriptions of this guy, which will help later on with all these other suspects because some really look good on paper, but they don't match the composite sketch. They're not even close, so they're ruled out.
When's the last time you got rewarded for brushing your teeth? Well, with Quip's new smart electric toothbrush, good habits can earn you great perks like free products, gift cards, and more.
Smart technology has improved so many aspects of our lives, from rerouting us away from traffic jams to improving our workouts, so why wouldn't it be used for better oral hygiene?
You probably heard us talk about Quip a million times, but this is something brand new that rewards you and your mouth.
The Quip Smart Brush for adults and kids connects to the Quip app with Bluetooth. This is so clever because now you can track how well you brush, when you brush, and you can even get tips and coaching to improve your habits.
I can tell you that from the perspective of a parent, this is a game changer. Also, everyone in your home can earn points for daily brushing and bonus points for completing challenges like streaks. Then you can redeem your points for rewards such as free products, gift cards, and all kinds of discounts from Quip brand partners.
Wow, gamification works, and what better goal than good oral hygiene? Well, maybe you already have a Quip, but you want to take advantage of this new feature. Well, that's no problem. Just upgrade to a smart motor.
Upgrade to it. That's like my racing games when I get to change the suspension and the brakes. It's pretty exciting.
The skin. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, beyond that, Quip has everything you need to build a complete routine. Even an eco-friendly solar battery charger to power your Quip with sunshine, and the refresh bag to bring your good oral care habits everywhere you go.
Also, if you've never seen a Quip, they're slim, lightweight, modern, and sleek, with no tangled wires or bulky chargers to weigh you down.
Plus, you can get brush head, toothpaste, and floss refills delivered from $5, and shipping is free. How smart is that?
Join over 5 million mouths who use Quip and save hundreds compared to other Bluetooth brushes when you get a Quip Smart Brush for just $45.
Start getting rewards for brushing your teeth today and go to getquip.com/legends right now to get your first refill free. That's your first refill free at getquip.com/legends.
Spelled GETQUIP.com/legends. Quip. Better oral health made simple and rewarding. Hey, Scott, I want to read to the audience a couple of comments that have been left on the BetterHelp website. And this is really impressive feedback, and I think it does a good job of illustrating exactly what BetterHelp is all about.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, as I said, these are from actual people who have signed up with BetterHelp. One user wrote, "I've never felt judged or neglected as I have with previous therapists. Each session I leave with another weight lifted off my shoulders. I am so grateful to have matched with Vicky on BetterHelp because she's taught me so much about self-love, setting boundaries, and forgiveness." And another user posted, Dr. Trosper is adept at guiding me to get to the root of the issues and problems and offering ways to handle them so I don't repeat past behaviors that weren't solving or helping the situations. He helps me to look at things from different perspectives and angles.
When you hear those testimonies, it's obvious people's lives are being improved through BetterHelp.com. And look, if there's something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals, it's time to check out BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist.
Let's be clear, BetterHelp is not a crisis hotline. It's not self-help either. BetterHelp offers real, one-on-one professional counseling, and it all takes place securely online.
If you're concerned about the expense of seeing a private counselor, well, this is more affordable than the traditional in-person counseling, and financial aid is available for those who need it. Whatever it takes, they want you to start living a happier life today.
Visit betterhelp.com/AL. That's better, H-E-L-P. Join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional.
There's a very special offer for Astonishing Legends listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/AL. Better, HELP.com/AL.
This is Paul from New Zealand. Thank you for listening to Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
So, of course, now we come to the gumshoe aspect of this, where local police and the FBI immediately began interviews with eyewitnesses and anyone who had come into contact with Cooper in Portland, Seattle, and Reno. They were also questioning possible suspects at this time immediately. By the time the 5-year anniversary of the hijacking rolled around, the FBI had tracked leads across the country and interviewed hundreds of people, resulting in the consideration of over 800 suspects. Which is, oh my gosh, the paperwork on
so a lot of people.
Well, after all that, I mean, they were able to eliminate all except for about 24 suspects. Not bad, but yeah, a lot of time wasted chasing, false positives here. Perhaps the most significant of these persons of interest early on was an Oregon man who had a minor rap sheet, and he caught the attention of the Portland police because of his name. Detectives had to consider the possibility that the alias of Dan Cooper, which he used to buy the ticket, was used in another crime, or that the man who purchased the plane ticket was really named Dan Cooper. Sometimes people do that. Again, this case is kind of crazy. Maybe he did use his real name. But that's Dan Cooper without the B initial. So this Oregon man who went by D.B. Cooper was soon eliminated as a suspect. But not before a reporter for the Oregon Journal named James Long would accidentally and forever add him to the legend. Okay, now this is, I just tripped on this maybe last night, but it's from the Oregonian. It's an article that was posted on July 22nd of 2016, and the title is Tiny Piece of D.B. Cooper Mystery Solved. Here I relish actually saying D.B. Cooper Mystery Solved because I think in this instance, this is mystery solved.
This piece of it.
Yeah, it was just recently updated here, January 9th, 2019, and this article is by Cale Williams. It seems like a reporter for the Oregonian. I'm just going to kind of read the article here. We'll start off, and then you can read the actual email by reporter James Long here. So after the introduction in the article here, it continues with saying, the folks over at the Columbia Journalism Review ran a story earlier this week on the role that a local Portland journalist played in the mystery as he worked the night of the hijacking and wrote some of the first stories that were distributed by the wire service United Press International. And Mr. Williams' article goes on to say, soon after this week's story went up, James Long, a reporter who worked at the Oregon Journal, a since closed newspaper in Portland, reached out to the CJR, the Columbia Journalism Review, and explained exactly how Dan turned into DB.
It was my mistake, he wrote to CJR in an email. Back in 1971, when rumors of the hijacking started circulating in the newsroom, Long heard that the plane that had been taken over was a Northwest Orient Airlines flight, and he immediately thought of a former coworker who had gone to do public relations for the airline, CJR reported. Long, who also worked at the Oregonian, Oregon Live for roughly 2 decades, dug through his Rolodex and jumped on the phone. I called as fast as I could, hoping to get through while every other reporter was piling up in line behind me, he told CJR. Someone at the airline confirmed the hijacker's last name was Cooper, but confusion arose when Long tried to nail down the perpetrator's first name. His source was talking to other people, and storms over the Portland area that day made for less than great reception, Long said. Somehow in the confusion, Long ended up with the initials DB. At the time, the Oregon Journal shared a building with offices of United Press International, and the two publications also often shared stories as well. A reporter from the wire service, identified by CJR as Clyde Jabin, grabbed a carbon copy of Long's story, culled some information from it, and sent his own version out on the wire, Long said, complete with the initials that would become synonymous with one of the Pacific Northwest's longest-running mysteries.
Aha!
Yes.
And thus, at least the name of the legend of D.B. Cooper was forever cemented into history. And, as you and I have discussed before, this is how sometimes an error in reporting gets passed along and then ends up as one of the things people remember most about a case.
The gospel.
Yeah.
Yep. Just because it's in print doesn't mean you can believe it. And this little trip up actually may have obfuscated one of the biggest clues in this story, because Dan Cooper, that name is not completely obscure in pop culture. It is obscure,
right.
But it turns out there is a comic book character named Dan Cooper who we will be talking about in part 2. But that's important because, when you think about it and you think about, oh, it's DB, and all of a sudden it's become DB, and no one's really thinking about Dan Cooper and making that connection in the investigation because everyone's calling him DB Cooper.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that we haven't really talked about. At this time, when you wanted to get on an airplane, you walked up to the counter. I think his ticket was like $20 or something. You walk up to the counter, you give him cash. You don't have to show ID. You don't have to tell him your real name. You don't go through an x-ray. They don't x-ray your belongings. Right. You just give them some money and you get on the plane like you're getting on a bus.
Yeah.
And that's why this was such an easy thing to pull off back then. There was a lot of hijackings going on as well, and there was no less than 15 copycats after this.
Right.
None of them succeeded, though.
It's, one of those cases where a few bad apples now spoils it for the rest of us. You used to be able to walk up to the gate. You didn't have to have a ticket or anything. It's like, grandma's flying in from Florida. Let's go meet her right at the gate. And you could meet people as they were getting off the plane.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the old days, you could just freely walk into the airport and they didn't search you because, people weren't acting that jerky back then. But once people found out, like, hey, you can walk on with almost anything, then it became a thing. And now you have to park 5 miles away from the airport. And
take your shoes off. Thank you, Eric Reed, for that stupid.
Yeah. Well, yes, there's a lot about air travel nowadays that was not like it used to be. Maybe there's more comfort. Maybe there's too much comfort nowadays because back then in the old days, people used to dress up to get on an airplane. And I know that's hard to believe now because now people are wearing pajamas and bringing full-size pillows like it's a sleepover. Comfort is maximum and maybe stress too much because now people are just behaving like it is their own house. So that was different. You could see why he would be wearing a suit. He's not calling attention to himself. I thought about this like, well, if I was going to do it, man, I maybe wear some coveralls, have a story that I was a mechanic, flying I needed to get to Seattle from Portland, or maybe I work for the airline, some kind of story where you could have some decent clothing, a jumpsuit in there somewhere, rather than just a dark black suit and a dress shirt and loafers.
Yeah, he was dressed like a Men in Black. Or Agent Smith from The Matrix.
A little bit, yeah. There you go. Exactly right. Well, as we get to the end here of part 1, you've heard the actual crime described. You've heard the sequence of events. You heard about the departure and everything that happens after that. We will now reserve for part 2 in our investigation, our cursory investigation, standing on the shoulders of other people's investigations. But there are a lot of theories out there. Certainly, it's one of those things that has captured the imagination of the public. And that's where the FBI has to leave it, because after decades of investigating, they have reached the end of what they're capable of doing. And so they issued a statement on where they're going to leave it. But it's not over yet, folks, except for the FBI. So here is what they said. This is a memo from the Seattle FBI field office dated July 12th, 2016. So it's not that long ago.
Right.
Where they finally said, okay, we're going to have to take a break here because we're at a dead end. we can't operate on speculation, people's anecdotes, and my uncle may have done this, or this guy suddenly bought 2 tractors. There's something that has to be more solid about this. So this is their memo on where they're going to leave it, what their stance is currently here from here on out until something else happens. And it's titled Update on Investigation of 1971 Hijacking by D.B. Cooper. Following one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in our history, on July 8, 2016, the FBI redirected resources allocated to the D.B. Cooper case in order to focus on other investigative priorities. During the course of the 45-year NORJAC investigation, the FBI exhaustively reviewed all credible leads, coordinated between multiple field offices to conduct searches, collected all available evidence, and interviewed all identified witnesses. Over the years, the FBI has applied numerous new and innovative investigative techniques, as well as examined countless items at the FBI laboratory. Evidence obtained during the course of the investigation will now be preserved for historical purposes at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. The mystery surrounding the hijacking of a Northwest Orient Airlines flight in November 1971 by a still unknown individual resulted in significant international attention and a decades-long manhunt. Although the FBI appreciated the immense number of tips provided by members of the public, none to date have resulted in a definitive identification of the hijacker. The tips have conveyed plausible theories, descriptive information about individuals potentially matching the hijacker, and anecdotes to include accounts of sudden, unexplained wealth. In order to solve a case, the FBI must prove culpability beyond a reasonable doubt, and, unfortunately, none of the well-meaning tips or applications of new investigative technology have yielded the necessary proof. Every time the FBI assesses additional tips for the NORJAC case, investigative resources and manpower are diverted from programs that more urgently need attention. Although the FBI will no longer actively investigate this case, should specific physical evidence emerge related specifically to the parachutes or the money taken by the hijacker, individuals with those materials are asked to contact their local FBI field office. So, now it's up to you, amateur sleuths and true crime enthusiasts.
Well, that covers the chain of events that led to the only unsolved civilian air piracy case in history. But there's a long list of compelling suspects in this case, and this is Astonishing Legends, so we're only just getting started. That's going to wrap up part 1 of our 2-part series on D.B. Cooper. We'll be back next week with part 2.
Please remember to support our sponsors. They help keep the show free and the lights on in Blanket Fortiana.
Special thanks to John Boland.
Hi, I'm Owen in Ireland.
Pete, Pamela, Jay, Jean.
Hi, I'm Paul from New Zealand.
I understand that this is with no implied promise of
Whiskey,
Galaxy-wide and
November.
Our show is edited by Sarah Voorhees Wendell and co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also our head of research.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane, and our sound design and additional composing is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the Astonishing Research Corps.
But most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
You can also support the show at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.